So if you were to somehow walk up to um, the laborers who were dragging those massive blocks of limestone across the Giza Plateau.
Right, to build the Great Pyramids.
Exactly. If you walked up to them and asked what they thought of their pharaoh, they would have probably just looked at you with complete confusion.
Oh, totally. 100%.
Because, I mean, not a single person building those iconic structures would have actually used that word for their ruler. Like, the word simply did not exist in that context yet.
Yeah, it's really funny. The title we instinctively use for these ancient rulers today is it's a complete anachronism for the early centuries of their civilization. It's basically one of history's most successful retroactive branding campaigns.
It really is, and that's exactly why today we are taking a custom-tailored deep dive for you, the learner, into this massive, comprehensive encyclopedia of the ancient Egyptian ruler.
Yeah, we're unpacking a lot of history today.
We really are. We're pulling apart the historical record to see how, absolute power is actually constructed, how a whole civilization builds a literal god king through language, architecture, and, well, what is essentially cosmic PR.
Cosmic PR is a great way to put it. And to understand the nature of that absolute authority, I mean, the evolution of that missing word is really the perfect place to start.
Right.
Because the linguistic journey maps perfectly onto how their power became increasingly centralized over the centuries.
So let's talk about that original term, which we now pronounce as Pra-Ru. It was written using two specific hieroglyphs, right?
Yeah, exactly. One symbol represented a house, and the other represented a column, which carried the meaning of, like, great or high.
Right, so translated literally, it just meant great house.
Exactly. It was a description of the royal palace as a physical institution, like a sprawling complex of administration. It was not a living, breathing person.
Which makes sense. I mean, it functions identically to how we use the White House today.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Right. Like when a news anchor says the White House announced a new policy, nobody assumes the physical building grew a mouth and held a press conference.
Right, right.
It's a linguistic stand-in. It elevates the executive power residing inside the building above the individual who just happens to be holding the office at the time.
Exactly. And for centuries, that administrative geographic meaning was literally the only way the term was deployed. It just referred to the court, the treasury, the physical structures of governance.
But languages change, especially when power dynamics shift.
They do. And when we move into the New Kingdom, so we're talking roughly the 14th century BCE, around the time of Thutmose III and Akhenaten, a really profound shift occurs in the surviving texts.
Right, the term great house stops being just a place.
Exactly. It becomes a respectful form of address for the actual human being sitting on the throne.
And the earliest confirmed instance of this shift in the historical record is wild. It's a letter written directly to Akhenaten.
Yeah, it is.
The writer addresses him as Great House, Life, Prosperity, Health, the Lord. So they are essentially looking at the king and saying, you are the institution.
You are the building.
Yeah.
And that transition from a physical location to a reverential epithet is crucial, but it still wasn't an official title formally attached to the royal name yet.
Oh, right. That took a while longer.
Yeah, we have to fast forward all the way to the 10th century BCE under King Siamon to see the very first dated appearance of the title Pharaoh, physically attached to a ruler's name in a religious document.
And then his successors, like Shoshenq first, kind of cemented that practice.
Yeah, exactly. They made it a permanent fixture of the royal identity.
But the evolution didn't stop there, which I find so fascinating, especially how it adapted to gender later on.
Oh, the Ptolemaic period.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. During the Ptolemaic period, which is the era of those Greek-descended rulers that culminated with, the famous Cleopatra VII, a female form of the word emerged in the texts. It was pre-3.t.
Right. And according to the research of historian Tara Sewell-Lassiter, this wasn't just a simple translation that meant female sovereign. It was much more complex than that.
How so?
Well, the way the Ptolemies utilized this female form reveals a highly specific religious and political strategy. It was used to express the concept of the royal pair ruling as a single, indivisible unit.
Oh, wow. So not just the queen on her own.
Right. The title was granted to queens regnant, like Cleopatra VII, but also to royal consorts who are not technically heads of state.
I see.
By presenting the king and queen together as a singular great house, they framed their joint rule as this unified, impenetrable front to the public. It was honestly a brilliant manipulation of an ancient term to stabilize a dynasty that was sometimes pretty precarious.
That is fascinating. And then from there, the term kind of embarked on a journey through neighboring cultures, leaving what we can almost think of as a um, linguistic fossil record.
Yeah, a fossil record is a great way to describe it.
Because the late Egyptian pronunciation sounded something like Pharaoh. And then the Hebrew Bible absorbed this as Paru.
Right, and the Greek translators of those texts adapted it to Pharaoh.
Exactly. Then the Quran utilizes the Arabic Quran, specifically in the context of the Exodus narrative. And finally, English translators of the King James Bible gave us the spelling Pharaoh with that distinctive H on the end that we use today.
It's amazing. That fossil record shows how a word for mud brick walls eventually became the global shorthand for ancient tyranny and divine rulership.
It really is. But, I mean, if the ruler is the living embodiment of the great house of government, we have to examine the actual work taking place inside that house, right?
Oh, absolutely, because the responsibility of this office went way, way beyond managing grain yields or, settling civil disputes.
Yeah, they were basically tasked with holding the physical universe intact.
Literally. The earliest pyramid texts frame the entire political existence of the sovereign around one singular maxim, which is bring Mot and repel Isfet.
Bring Mot and repel Isfet. Okay,
Yeah.
break those down for us.
So those two concepts are basically the foundational physics of the ancient Egyptian worldview. Mot translates roughly to cosmic order, balance, truth, harmony.
Like the predictability of the sun rising and the seasons changing.
Exactly. And Isfet is the terrifying alternative. It's chaos, injustice, violence, basically the unraveling of creation. So the pharaoh existed primarily as the mechanism to maintain Mot.
But to achieve that level of cosmic maintenance, they had to hold an absolute monopoly on power.
Like total monopoly.
Yeah.
The historical sources demonstrate a complete absence of any separation of powers, none whatsoever.
Right, because a ruler technically owned all the land in the kingdom. They enacted every law. They commanded the military.
And even more importantly, in the religious sphere, they were viewed as the only human being qualified to dialogue with the gods on an equal level.
Wow. So every priest, every scribe, and every vizier in that massive state administration was really just acting by delegation of the royal person.
Exactly. In the temple artwork spread across the entire country, the pharaoh is invariably depicted as the supreme officiant. They stand as the equal of the deities, making the necessary offerings.
And in return for these offerings, the gods activate the forces of nature for the benefit of Egypt.
Right. This theology made the rulers solely responsible for calling upon the divine forces to regulate the Nile's annual flooding, preventing famines, and stepping into the role of the sole victor who physically repels the plunderers of the desert, because those plunderers represented Isfet.
Okay, but I am stuck on the inherent danger of this arrangement.
Yeah, it's a huge risk.
Right, because if my entire political brand is that I personally negotiate with the universe to make the Nile flood, I am literally taking credit for the mechanics of nature.
You are.
So what happens during an inevitable severe drought? Like, how does a ruler survive a failing harvest when their literal job description is preventing the exact chaos? If a terrible famine hits, does the pharaoh take the heat for failing at their cosmic job?
Yes. That dynamic exposes the ultimate vulnerability of absolute power. When a ruler claims responsibility for the sunshine and the rain, they inevitably shoulder the blame for the famine and the plague.
Wow.
Now, obviously, official state records, which were essentially just royal propaganda carved in stone, they rarely advertise these failures.
Sure, they're not going to carve their own failures into a monument.
Right. But archaeological and broader historical evidence points to severe political instability, violent uprisings, and entire dynasties collapsing in direct correlation with extended periods of low Nile floods or ecological disasters.
Because if Matt was failing, the unspoken but undeniable implication was that the pharaoh was failing to repel Isfet.
Exactly. The burden of that office was immense and incredibly precarious.
So if you're carrying the weight of a precarious universe on your shoulders, you constantly need to provide intimidating, unquestionable visual proof of your authority.
Oh, big time. You need clothing and symbols that communicate your monopoly on violence and order to anyone who even looks at you.
Which brings us to the royal wardrobe. It was this collection of highly specific, religiously charged regalia. Every scepter, staff, and crown was a visual manifestation of authority.
And a lot of those designs dated all the way back to prehistoric, pre-dynastic Egypt.
The scepters alone tell such a complex story of how they viewed governance. You have the Heka scepter, which is that classic curved shepherd's crook, right? Symbolizing the ruler guiding and nurturing their flock.
Right, and then you have the wasp scepter, which is a long, straight staff topped with an animal head, representing raw power and dominion.
And we often see the ruler depicted holding the crook crossed over their chest, paired with the flail, an agricultural tool used to thresh grain.
Yeah, it's all about providing and protecting.
Mm.
But then, resting right on the forehead was the uraeus, the rearing cobra.
Ah, the cobra.
And the uraeus was not just some passive badge of office. According to the religious texts, this cobra possessed agency. It actively protected the king by literally spitting fire at the enemies of the state.
Oh, wow. So it was like a lethal divine security detail projecting outward from the ruler's mind.
Exactly. But honestly, the most elaborate visual branding strategy was the headgear. The various crowns functioned as, like, wearable maps of the ruler's political and spiritual domain.
Because the geography of Egypt is so heavily divided between that lush, spreading river delta in the north and the narrow, harsh river valley in the south.
Right, and the crowns reflected that tension perfectly.
You had the Dishret, which was the red crown of Lower Egypt in the north, and the Hedjet, the white crown of Upper Egypt in the south.
And when those two culturally distinct lands were united into one empire, the state didn't just pick one crown. They physically nested the white crown inside the red crown to create the Shent, the double crown.
It's like a daily physical assertion of a forced, fragile unity.
Exactly. And the headgear diversified based on the specific era and the ritual occasion, too. Like, a ruler might wear the neems, that iconic striped cloth kerchief we immediately recognize from the solid gold death mask of Tutankhamun.
Right, the classic King Tut look.
Yeah. And in religious contexts, they might wear the Atef crown, which resembled the white crown, but was flanked by these elaborate ostrich feathers and topped with a gold disc.
Which deeply associated the wearer with Osiris, the god of the afterlife.
Precisely. And then during the New Kingdom, the Kepresh, or the blue crown, became prominent, frequently depicted in scenes of the ruler actively engaging in battle.
Okay, so we have thousands of statues, detailed relief carvings, and vivid paintings depicting these rulers wearing these intricate, towering crowns.
We do.
Yet, and this is wild, the Egyptologist Bob Breyer points out an astonishing physical reality in the archaeological record. Not a single authentic ancient Egyptian crown has ever been discovered.
It is wild. It remains a profound mystery in the field. I mean, think about when Howard Carter opened the tomb of Tutankhamun in the 1920s.
Aye.
He found an undisturbed burial chamber packed to the ceiling with gold artifacts, disassembled chariots, royal regalia like the crook and flail, Yet among all those treasures, there was no crown.
Not a single one.
Nope. The king was buried with intricate diadems, but none of the great crowns of state accompanied him into eternity.
Which feels crazy to me. It's like finding the British monarch's tomb packed with priceless art, but completely missing the crown jewels.
That is a great comparison.
But Breyer's theory on this absence actually makes perfect logical sense.
It really does.
Because if these specific hats were buried with every passing ruler, the state would run out of their most potent magical artifacts pretty quickly.
Exactly. These crowns were not the personal property of the individual who just happened to be wearing them. They belonged to the eternal institution of the state.
Right. They were imbued with such deep religious magic that they had to be physically passed to the successor to ensure the uninterrupted continuation of Mot.
Right. The crown is the institution, and the human is merely its temporary vehicle.
Wow.
And this institutional absorption of the individual extended far beyond just the physical crowns and into the very identity of the ruler. I mean, a personal name given at birth was completely insufficient for a living god.
Yeah, they needed an upgrade.
Big time. By the time of the Middle Kingdom, the official identity of the ruler expanded into the five-name titulary, which was this elaborate sequence they adopted the absolute moment they took the throne.
Okay, I am looking at the mechanics of this naming convention, and it just seems incredibly exhausting. Like, why wasn't just claiming to be the supreme ruler enough? Why did they need to keep tacking on new titles until a single introduction required 5 distinct names?
Well, you have to remember, the five-name titulary was the ultimate exercise in political coalition building.
Okay, how so?
The kingdom was vast, incorporating numerous regional deities, competing priesthoods, and distinct geographical identities. The titulary was a deliberate strategy to absorb every potential source of opposition into the ruler's own identity.
Oh, that's smart. So the first of these is the Horus name, which is the oldest in the sequence, right?
Yes, it is written inside a square, fortified frame called a serac.
And the Serac is literally a drawing of the palace facade.
Exactly. This name declared the king as the earthly incarnation of the falcon god Horus, residing within the great house.
Okay. And then the second is the Nesubiti name, introduced during the First Dynasty. This title is accompanied by two specific biological symbols, the sedge and the bee.
Right. The sedge is a resilient reed native to the southern river valley, representing Upper Egypt. And the bee symbolizes the fertile agricultural delta of Lower Egypt in the north.
So the title translates functionally to He of the Sedge and the Bee, or King of Upper and Lower Egypt.
Yep, binding those two historically tense regions right to his person.
Then third is the Nebdi name, meaning the two ladies. This name linked the ruler to Nekbet, the vulture goddess of Upper Egypt, and Wadjet, the cobra goddess of Lower Egypt.
Right. And the fourth name is the Golden Horus, which features the falcon god perched on the hieroglyphic symbol for gold.
Because gold was considered the flesh of the gods, since it never tarnishes.
Exactly. So this name served to permanently assert the ruler's divine eternal status. Right. And these are the names modern people are usually the most familiar with because they are the ones enclosed in those famous cartouches.
And a cartouche is not just a decorative oval, right? It's a depiction of a loop of rope tied with a knot.
Yes, representing a magical barrier that offers eternal protection to the name trapped inside. The praenomen was the throne name, often incorporating the name of the supreme sun god, Re.
And the nomen was the birth name, but upon taking the throne, it was preceded by the epithet son of Re.
Exactly. So by embedding the dominant gods and the entirety of the national geography into their daily signature, the pharaoh made it ideologically impossible to separate the ruler from the state.
Because to rebel against the throne was to rebel against the sun, the soil, and the physical order of the universe itself.
You nailed it.
It's just wild. You take a mundane building, give it a cosmic job description, dress it in magical crowns of forced unity, and grant it 5 names encompassing the entire physical world. I mean, the inevitable culmination of this process is the staggering claim of actual divinity.
Oh, absolutely. And when we examine how neighboring contemporary cultures reacted to this specific flavor of extreme propaganda, the friction is palpable.
I can imagine.
Yeah, taking a broader view of the ancient Near East really highlights just how extreme the Egyptian concept of divine kingship truly was. Like in the powerful Sumerian city-states of Mesopotamia, kings were viewed as vital mediators between the heavens and the earth.
Right, but they were fundamentally mortal.
Exactly. Even the legendary King Gilgamesh, despite his divine parentage and immense power, is ultimately a tragic figure whose core narrative is his failure to achieve immortality.
He is painfully human.
Very much so. But the Egyptian state, however, pushed the narrative entirely past human limitations.
Yeah, their PR machine practically erased their humanity. During the early dynastic period, they were the literal incarnation of Horus walking the earth.
Right.
And by the time of King Geoffrey in the 26th century BCE, the state began promoting the narrative that the ruler practically ceased to have a human father at all.
Yeah, the official story became that the Queen Mother was magically impregnated by the solar deity Ra. Some texts even claim the king was fashioned before the sky or the earth had even been created.
It's such a profound assertion of supremacy. And it provoked some pretty intense, sometimes baffled reactions from later historical traditions that encountered these monumental claims.
Oh, for sure. The classical Greek historians really struggled to synthesize this concept.
Like Diodorus Siculus, writing in the 1st century BCE, he seemed to support the idea that the Egyptian rulers received legitimate divine honors.
Right. But Herodotus flat out denied the premise. He claimed the Egyptian priests themselves rejected the notion that their human kings were actual gods.
Which makes sense for a Greek perspective. The Greek cultural framework featured gods who were immortal but deeply flawed, and humans who were brilliant but definitively mortal. They couldn't easily accommodate a human claiming unyielding cosmic divinity.
Exactly. But honestly, the most severe, systematic deconstruction of this divine hubris emerges from rabbinic literature.
Oh, I love this part.
So good. These ancient scholars and commentators looked back at the pharaoh not as a misguided monarch, but as the ultimate tragicomic cautionary tale of human arrogance.
The takedown in these texts, specifically in the Midrashic writings, which are ancient rabbinic commentaries on the Hebrew scriptures,
Right.
is just brutal in its poetic justice.
Brutal and hilarious.
Yes. The texts describe the pharaoh hubristically looking at the Nile River and claiming to have created it, just boasting that he is the sole owner and architect of the water that gives Egypt life.
Right. And the book of Exodus features a direct divine mockery of this claim.
Oh.
God responds to the Pharaoh's boast of owning the river by bringing a devastating plague of frogs directly out of that very same river.
It's incredible. The source of his supposed divine creation becomes the exact instrument of his agricultural destruction.
Exactly. And the Midrashic commentators push the critique even further.
This is the best detail.
They describe the Pharaoh as a deeply heretical figure who presented himself to his subjects as a self-created lord of the universe who didn't require sustenance or suffer human weakness. But the rabbinic writers expose the absurdity of this illusion by pointing out the most mundane biological reality. They write that the Pharaoh's grand claims of divinity were consistently exposed early every morning, because a god who claims not to need food or produce waste
Still has to sneak down to the reeds of the Nile River to use the bathroom in secret.
Exactly. It's so humbling.
It really is. Stripping away the 5 majestic names, removing the magical crowns that must be surrendered at death, and looking past the towering palace walls basically leaves you with a fragile human being who needs to use the river just like the laborers building the pyramids.
Perfectly said. One culture's ultimate symbol of cosmic order becomes another culture's lasting lesson on the absurdity of human arrogance.
It perfectly captures the duality of this ancient institution, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, we see a masterful, centuries-long construction of absolute authority that successfully stabilized and governed a massive empire. But simultaneously, it's an institution built on claims so precariously grand that they invited inevitable ridicule the exact moment the military and ecological power backing them began to wane.
So, for you, the learner, listening to this deep dive, the evolution of the Egyptian ruler is not just some piece of ancient trivia. It is a true masterclass in how authority is manufactured and maintained.
Absolutely.
Because when modern political leaders mandate specific symbolism, or when they deliver speeches carefully framed by imposing state architecture,
Or when they adopt expansive titles to project strength and unity.
exactly, they're executing a strategy perfected thousands of years ago on the banks of the Nile. The core objective remains identical. Convince the public that the person standing at the podium is the only force capable of holding back the chaos.
Yeah, the technological methods of projecting that power have obviously evolved exponentially, but the fundamental human desire to seek order and stability in the form of an absolute, unquestioned authority, that remains a constant thread running through all of human civilization.
It really does. So if the ancient Egyptians relied on their unburied magical crowns, their venomous scepters, and their 5-part names to project their cosmic power, it forces us to look pretty closely at the theater of modern governance.
It certainly does.
What are the invisible magical crowns that our leaders wear today that convince us they are the only ones standing between order and the complete collapse of the universe?
That is a very vital question to keep in mind the next time the Great House makes an announcement.
It really is. Well, thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll see you next time.